The Liebherr LTM 1500 is a heavy mobile crane with a maximum capacity of 500 tonnes at 3 metre radius. The model of it has been awaited for a long time, and here it is in a Liebherr branded box with a picture of the real crane on one side and a picture of the model on the other. As is often the case with models like this, there's no information about the real crane. But the good news when you pull the box out is that there's a nice instruction manual with it. It's high quality and a lot of effort's gone into it. Firstly, it's very good to see an itemised parts list, and the rest of it consists of high quality photos and descriptions, and it covers the assembly and most of the features of the model. So it certainly earns a plus point, but there is one thing missing, and that's reeving diagrams for the 3 different hooks that are supplied with the model. So let's get to the box. It's factory sealed, and when you lift the lid, all the parts are contained in one tray. It is quite tightly packed, but the packaging does a good job, and there are no defects or broken parts on the review model. The model is delivered with a 50 metre boom, but this part allows an 84 metre configuration. At the end it looks like packaging, but don't remove it because it's there to allow smooth telescoping. The crane can be configured to meet the weight restrictions in different countries, and here we'll assemble the heaviest configuration. So first up we'll raise the boom, and it's got a great locking system using an Allen key and grub screws to tighten up on the pistons. With the boom up we can remove the top section of the 50 metre configuration. To do that you release the final spring clip, and wow, did you see that shoot out? And there is the part that flew out. It's the locking clip with a spring attached. So let's take another look in slow motion. Here you see it flying out of the boom, and if you're unlucky it will hit you in the jib. To install the 84 metre boom it's just the reverse process, and we'll forgive the attack by the spring clip and then just install it in the end of the boom section. There's a slight ridge on the clip, and that needs to be pointing towards the top of the boom. Once the clip's properly installed we can offer up the boom and then go for full penetration. It gently slides in, and then that's the 84 metre boom configured. The next thing to attach is the Y-guy arrangement. It can travel separately as a load, but if the axle limits permit it, it can travel on the crane. So to install it we just need to line up the connection points at the front and make sure that the rams and the guy rods are not tied up in the wrong place, and it should just neatly drop into position. It's then secured using a couple of steel pins, and they go in quite easily. We then have to attach the end of the hydraulic rams, and that's a screwed connection, and again that's an easy connection to make because the engineering is good and it goes together well. The next job is to connect the end of the guy rods, and for this there are tiny brass nuts and bolts and special tools to make the connection. These are very small parts and are easily lost, but they do give a model a very high feeling of model engineering precision. So we're ready now to make the connection, so we'll just feed the bolt through the end of the guy rod and into the connector, and then tighten it up using the nut contained in the other tool. To show the model in a transport arrangement we need to fold down the Y-guy arrangement, and that means there's a little bit of fiddling about to do to get the guy rods to sit in their proper position. There are various hangers that they fit onto, so it's just a matter of getting them in the right position so that they look right. There's another detail to add at the back of the crane, and that's an access ladder which just clips onto the cab. We won't put a hook on the crane at this point, but it is now ready to hit the road. And one of the nice possibilities with a model like this is that if you don't want to show it fully erected, as long as you've got suitable trucks, you can make an interesting transport convoy. The detail underneath the crane is very good, and it's almost a shame not to be able to see it more easily. There's rubber mud flaps, and the transmission and suspension are fully modelled, and it's interesting to see how the access to the slewing ring is modelled. Overall it's a top quality detailed crane chassis. The tyres are really good too, with Michelin branding in the sidewalls, and there are different wheels for driven and non-driven axles. The driving cab is fine, it's got Liebherr printed on the seat backs. There's a loop at the front for attaching a hook, and there's a generic number plate too. Detailing in the engine area is also high quality with a mixture of plastic and metal parts. One thing that really adds to the realistic look is the use of very small graphics, and you see these on many places on the model. At the back of the carrier the use of many different components gives an authentic look. The outrigger beams are finely modelled in metal with realistic warning graphics. And a particularly nice detail is the toothed slewing ring with its drive pinions. The crane body also has lots of excellent small detailing. Not to be outdone, the crane cab has got metal railings, tiny graphics and finely detailed lights. The counterweight is all separate metal parts with the Liebherr name embossed in many of them. And sitting on top, the assembly for the second and third winches is a highly detailed part. The main boom rams have metal cylinder jackets, so the colour match is perfect with the other metal parts. And the detail on the main boom is really good, including a rotating metal spooling drum. The main boom sections are made of a thin lightweight metal which is probably aluminium, and it produces a very realistic profile. The detail level at the boom head is very high, although there are 12 metal pulleys at the front rather than the 13 shown in Liebherr documentation. The Y-guy arrangement is a well-made metal part with only the plastic cylinder jackets being slightly off colour. The guy rods are made of metal and the painted rivet heads are a nice touch. There are 3 hook blocks supplied with the model, and that's a good selection. And they are well-made, nicely detailed metal parts. The pulleys are all metal, there are plenty of tying off points along the top. And a very nice aspect is that they've got working safety catches. These are powered by very small springs, which is quite an achievement on the biggest of the hooks. But actually, even if you go to the smallest hook, that's also got working safety catches, powered by really minute springs. The Liebherr LTM 1500 first appeared at the Bauma show in 1998. Since then it's probably become the most successful crane in its class with over 400 sold. It's used for many different applications, but it's fairly common to see it in city centres where it's used for tower crane erection, as shown here. Many different companies own the real crane, so you can expect to see the model produced in many different colours too. We'll start the look of the features underneath, and there is independent steering on many of the axles, with the real crane not having steering on axles 5 and 6. The range of movement on some of the axles is limited. There is also independent sprung suspension, and you can see here how detailed it is, although it is stiff. One problem is that the steering mechanism on some of the axles is too loose, and also on the review model not all wheels were fully grounded, which shows in some poses. It's time to set the crane up, so the first thing to do is to pull out the outrigger beams, and they're 2-stage and pull out quite smoothly. They've got very nice locking bars which hold the pads fully under the crane when it's in transport mode, so you need to free that up in order to turn the pad so that you can lower it. It has an internal screw thread with a reasonable amount of travel, and when you've centred the pad up, there are tiny locking clips which go in to keep the pad centred. The spring clips are very small and easily lost, so you have to take care with them. But not small are the heavy spreader plates which are also included with the model. They just go under the outriggers, and they've got lifting lugs as well, so they could be lifted by a crane. The whole outrigger arrangement is good because it can lift the crane up wheels free. Next up, the ladder is removed and the crane cab is rotated round into its operating position. And you can add the ladder back if you've got trouble getting into the cab. Next up, we'll put a hook on, so to do that we'll put the special key into the winch drum and release some of the thread. One word of warning here is to make sure the thread does not slip off the end of the winch drum and wind itself around the axles, because it's a bugger to sort out. Also, the winch drum here is not loose and free rolling, so it will hold a load, but it's a very clunky mechanism, and it really cries out for something much smoother and nicer to use. Up at the front, I've reeved the small hook and tied a knot in the hoist rope, and that allows the tying off to be replicated in a similar way as it's done on the real crane. So here you can see the end of the hoist rope being put through the tying off point, and when that's done you then give it a good tug downwards to engage the knot. And that provides quite a nice tying off arrangement, which is easy to reconfigure later if you want to change the arrangement. So with that done, the hook's on and we can move on to sorting out the counterweight. It is provided as a number of separate pieces so you can configure it how you like. And an interesting display pose is to put it on the carrier deck as if the crane was self-ballasting. After you've added as many slabs as you want, you can then add the second and third winches which have their own assembly. And that just slots neatly into place on top of the counterweight arrangement. If you set the self-ballasting up correctly, it makes a very interesting pose. But enough with posing, let's get on and attach the counterweight properly. So we'll add the winch assembly on top and then it just pins into place with a small pin on either side. With that done, if you're strong enough, you can lift the whole assembly up and it just hooks into place on the back of the crane. And then you can secure it in position with a couple of pins, one on either side. The last bit of detail to add is a little catwalk, and that just plugs into one side of the winch assembly. And if you really want to go large, you can get to the maximum counterweight by adding 2 large blocks on either side. These do just slot into place, but they would easily slide off if you knock the model. So to secure them, you can use a locking pin which goes down through the counterweights and locks them into the bottom slabs. With all the counterweight on, the model's getting pretty heavy, but it rotates very well, it's very smooth, and there's no rocking. Time now to have a look at a couple of the smaller features, and on the cab there's a tiny rotating light at the front. Very, very small and really nicely implemented. The cab also tilts to give the operator an easy view looking up, and it stays in the tilted position well. Moving on to the boom telescoping, and that's best demonstrated on a section that's not fitted to the crane. Telescoping is smooth, and it's got a very nice feature, which is that each section has separate locking points. These replicate the real crane and are positioned at 46% extension. To go on and reach the next locking point, you press the clip in and then extend the boom. And once the clip gets there, you might need to jiggle it a bit to get it to lock properly, and that's at 92% extension. And of course, if you want to go for the maximum, you just press the clip in again and it goes out to 100% extension. To increase the lifting capacity of the crane, the Y-guide tensioning system is used. This fully works on the model, and the first thing to do is to lift up the 2 frames. And that allows you to unscrew the guy ropes which are temporarily parked fixed to the frames. They're secured by the tiny brass nuts and bolts, and when you get those out, you can then remove the connecting point. There are winch drums at the end of the Y-guide frames, and you use the key to let out some rope. And then you can connect the end of the guy rope to the boom head using the nuts and bolts. With the system all connected up, the next thing to do is to provide a bit of tension. And to do that, you just wind in on the key at the end of the Y-guide frames and it begins to get the whole thing tightened up. Finally, to achieve the objective, you spread them out wide. And the end result is a nice piece of model engineering that works very well, and it makes a realistic impression of the real crane. Finally, also included with the model is a Liebherr block you can use as a load. With the crane fully erected, it becomes a very impressive looking model, and because of the realistic profile and detailing, it looks very much like the real crane. So how big is it fully erected? Let's get the measuring tape out, and at full extension the boom reaches an impressive 70 inches or 177 centimetres. Overall then, WSI have produced a top-notch model of the LTM 1500. Certainly the detail level is really excellent and convincing, and if the features are not perfect, they are on the whole very good. The quality is also very good, making it an outstanding model.